It was a quiet morning on the space station, and Jake, a young human, was preparing for another long shift. As a technician on the station, his life was usually full of routine checking equipment, fixing wires and making sure everything was running smoothly, but today was different. Today, he had a new roommate. Jake wasn't sure how he felt about the situation. The message from his landlord had been short and to the point. New roommate, be ready. The last time Jake had a roommate, it didn't go well. His previous roommate, a fellow human, had left the station in a hurry after a huge argument. Since then, Jake had been living alone. He was about to leave for work when the door to his shared quarters opened. Standing in the doorway was the alien Jake froze. The creature was tall, maybe 7 feet, with smooth greenish-blue skin and eyes that seemed to shimmer like stars. Its arms were long and muscular, and it had a strange yet graceful way of moving. Jake blinked twice, thinking he might be dreaming. "Ah, hello," Jake said, unsure of what to say. The alien smiled, or at least Jake thought it was a smile. It had a sort of warmth in its expression. "Greetings." "I am Nira," the alien said in perfect, calm English. Jake nodded, still a little shocked. "I'm Jake. Welcome, I guess." Nira's voice was soft and calm, almost soothing, and it made Jake feel less nervous. But there was something about the creature's size that made him feel tiny in comparison. Nira stood there for a moment, watching Jake with interest, then nodded again. "I will settle in," Nira said. "I hope to be a good roommate." Jake, still trying to wrap his mind around the situation, smiled awkwardly. "Of course, I'm sure we'll get along just fine." Nira set down a small bag and began unpacking. Jake decided to leave for his shift, hoping that some time away would help him process this strange situation. As he walked through the hallways of the space station, his mind wandered.
How would he live with someone?
Something like Nira? He'd read about aliens in the news, but seeing one up close was completely different. At work, he tried to focus, but his thoughts kept drifting back to his new roommate. Was Nira really as peaceful as she seemed? Jake had heard rumors of other aliens, some peaceful, others not so much. Was he in danger? As the day passed, Jake tried to shake off the uneasy feeling in his stomach, and by the time his shift ended, he was exhausted, but he couldn't ignore the curiosity he felt about Nira. He had to admit he was intrigued. Maybe this could be a good experience. Maybe Nira would turn out to be just like any other roommate. Jake entered the quarters slowly, half expecting something strange to happen. But when he walked inside, he was surprised. Ra had already started to arrange her things in the room, so he was sitting on the bed, examining some sort of strange device, making quiet clicking noises as she touched the buttons. "Hey, I'm back," Jake said, trying to sound casual. Nira looked up and nodded. "I have organized my space. It is small, but it will do." Jake walked over to his bed and sat down, still a bit unsure. "So, what do you do for fun around here? Anything you like to do in your free time?" Nira seemed to think for a moment. "I enjoy observing the stars. There is much beauty in the universe." Jake smiled. "Yeah, I guess it is kind of beautiful out there." They both fell into silence, the only sound in the room being the quiet hum of the station's machinery. Jake tried to relax, but his mind kept wandering. He was starting to feel like he had to be extra careful. He wasn't used to having an alien roommate, and he wasn't sure how things would go. "Do you sleep?" Jake asked hesitantly. Nira gave a soft laugh. "Yes, I sleep, though not in the same way humans do. I have a different rhythm, but I rest." "Okay, good to know," Jake said. Feeling relieved that at least sleep wouldn't be an issue, he stood up and stretched. "I think I'm going to take a nap, to rest a bit before tomorrow." Nira nodded again. "Rest well, Jake." Lay down on his bed and closed his eyes, but his thoughts wouldn't stop racing. His mind was full of questions. How would he handle having a roommate like Nira? Would they get along? Would it be as easy as he hoped? Or would things get awkward? He sighed and drifted off to sleep, hoping that by the time he woke up, he'd have a better understanding of his new living situation. But little did Jake know, this was just the beginning. Jake woke up slowly, the soft hum of the space station's systems filling the air. It took a moment for him to remember where he was. The light in the room was dim, and everything was quiet. For a brief second, it felt like he was back home, but then his eyes opened fully, and he remembered. He was on a space station, far away. From Earth, with a roommate who wasn't human, he looked over at the other side of the room. Nira was asleep on her bed, curled up in a ball, her long limbs tangled in the sheets. Jake had never seen anything sleep like that. Her body seemed to stretch and twist in strange ways, but she appeared peaceful. Jake sighed and sat up, rubbing his eyes. He had always been a bit of a night owl, and now that he had time to rest, he figured he might as well enjoy it. He stood up and walked to the small kitchen area, making himself a cup of tea. His thoughts were still buzzing with questions about Nira. It wasn't that he minded having her as a roommate. It was just ... different. It wasn't easy for Jake to get used to sharing. His space with an alien, the space station, had a sort of quiet charm, but the reality of living with someone so completely different from himself was beginning to feel strange. Jake had seen pictures and read stories about aliens, but living with one in such close quarters was an entirely new experience. After a few minutes, he sat back down on his bed, the warm tea in his hands. He glanced over at Nira again. She didn't seem so bad. She hadn't done anything strange yet, except for the way she slept. Jake chuckled softly to himself. Maybe she was just like him, a little odd in her own way. He leaned back and closed his eyes, hoping to get another nap before his shift later that day. The station was quiet and everything felt calm. He was finally starting to relax. But as Jake was drifting off, he felt something shift beside him. He opened his eyes quickly, a little startled. Nira had moved in her sleep. In fact, she had shifted so much that her body was now halfway across the room, her long limbs hanging over the edge of her bed. For a second, Jake didn't know what to do. Should he get up? Should he say something? Before he could decide, Nira let out a soft, almost inaudible sigh, and suddenly, she rolled. And when she rolled, she landed. On him, Jake gasped and froze. Nira was now sprawled across his chest, her body completely covering him. Her warmth was surprisingly comforting, but at the same time, Jake felt trapped. The weight of her was nothing like he had expected, and for a moment, he was unsure of how to react. Nira, Jake said, trying to sound calm. He wasn't sure if the alien even understood personal space. Was this normal for her? Was it a cultural difference? Nira stirred a little, her eyes fluttering open. She looked down at Jake, her large, shimmering eyes blinking in confusion. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said softly, her voice filled with genuine apology. "I did not mean to intrude. I must have moved in my sleep." Jake didn't know whether to laugh or just stay quiet. "It's fine," he said, trying to sound casual. "I just didn't expect that." Nira quickly rolled off him, sitting up on the edge of the bed. She seemed embarrassed, which was surprising to Jake. He had never imagined an alien could feel embarrassed. "I didn't mean to be too." "Close," Nira said, glancing at him. "I hope I did not make you uncomfortable." Sat up, rubbing his face. "It's okay. It's a little different from what I'm used to. I didn't think that would happen." Nira nodded and sat there for a moment, not looking at Jake. There was a long silence, and Jake wasn't sure how to fill it. He didn't want to make the situation any more awkward, but it was hard to ignore how strange it all felt. Finally, Nira broke the silence. "I am sorry. I know that humans have different boundaries. I'm still learning." ... double quotes. Jake blinked, surprised by her honesty.
Ow.
"No need to apologize. I'm just not used to sharing a room with someone like you. I guess I'm still getting used to everything." Nira smiled, her eyes softening. "I understand. I will be more careful. I do not want to cause discomfort." Jake nodded. "Yeah, that would be nice." He hesitated for a moment before continuing. "But look, it's not that big of a deal. I just need to get used to it. I'm sure it'll be fine." Nira looked relieved. and Jake realized that maybe this wasn't as strange as it felt. Maybe it would take some time, but he could adapt. After all, living with an alien was probably going to have a lot of surprises. Oh, but so far, none of it felt dangerous, just different. I'll try not to roll over on you again, Nira said with a light chuckle, and Jake couldn't help but smile. It's okay, he said, feeling a little more at ease. Just try not to roll into me while I'm napping, all right? Nira's laughter filled the room, and Jake found himself laughing along with her. For a moment, the weirdness of the situation faded away. They were both strangers in a strange place, but maybe, just maybe, they could make it work. The next few days passed by in a blur of strange moments. Jake had gotten used to Nira's presence in the room, but there were still moments that caught him off guard. It wasn't anything dangerous or scary, just ... different. Nira's way of moving was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. And fast, and sometimes, Jake felt like he was living with someone from a completely different world. Nira would often stretch out in ways that seemed impossible to Jake's human body. It was as if she could twist and bend without any effort at all. It looked unnatural, but it wasn't, and that fascinated Jake. One evening, after work, Jake returned to their shared quarters, feeling drained. He had spent the whole day fixing broken equipment on the station and dealing with minor issues, and all he wanted now was some rest. He walked into the room, expecting Nira to be in her usual spot, but she was sitting in the middle of the room, eyes closed, her body still as a statue. Jake paused in the doorway, unsure of what she was doing. Nira, called. Her eyes opened slowly, and she looked at him with a soft smile. Jake, I was practicing, she said, her voice calm and almost distant. Practicing what? Jake asked, curious. I am learning the art of stillness. It helps me focus. Jake didn't quite understand what that meant, but he nodded. All right, well, I'm just going to take a nap. Feel free to keep practicing. Nira nodded, and Jake walked over to his bed, lying down. The room was quiet, the only sound being the soft hum of the station's systems in the background. Jake tried to get comfortable. He noticed something. Nira wasn't sitting still anymore. Now she was moving again, but not in the way he expected. She was walking around, her long limbs flowing smoothly as she explored every corner of the room. At first, Jake thought she was just being curious, but then he realized she was moving closer to him. She wasn't speaking, just silently gliding across the floor. When she got close enough, she stopped, standing over him. Her long shadow stretched across the floor, and Jake's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't used to anyone, especially not an alien, being so close to him without any warning. Nira, what's going on? Jake asked, sitting up feeling a little uncomfortable. I wanted to observe you, Nira said simply. I have been learning about human behavior. It is interesting. Jake blinked in surprise. You've been watching me? I have been trying to understand how humans interact with each other. Your movements, your speech, your emotions. It is all fascinating. Jake tried to hide his discomfort, but he wasn't sure how to handle this. I'm not sure I'm comfortable being watched like that. Nira tilted her head slightly, looking puzzled. I am sorry, Jake. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's okay, I just ... didn't know how to react. I mean, you're not exactly a typical roommate. I understand, Nira said softly, stepping back a little. I am still learning. It was a long pause. Jake wasn't sure what to say next. He had never really thought about how Nira might feel being so far from home. Maybe she was just lonely. Maybe she didn't know how to connect with a human, especially when their species were so different. Do you miss your home? Jake asked quietly. Nira's eyes softened. Yes, I miss my planet, my people, but I am here to learn. I will do my best to be a good roommate. Jake gave her a small smile. I guess we both have a lot to learn, huh? Nira nodded. Yes, we do. The rest of the evening was calm. Nira returned to her corner of the room, and Jake lay down again, his mind still racing. He couldn't help but wonder if he had been too harsh. Nira wasn't from Earth, and maybe there were things she just didn't understand. He had to be patient, just like she was being patient with him. As he drifted off to sleep, he thought about how strange this all was. One moment he was trying to adjust to living with an alien, and the next was dealing with the fact that his roommate was studying his every move. But then again, maybe it wasn't so bad. He had always been someone who liked to learn, so maybe this could be a good experience for both of them. The next morning, Jake woke up to find Nira already up and moving around. She wasn't practicing stillness this time. Instead, she was making a strange humming sound as she worked on something at her desk. Jake rubbed his eyes and stretched. "Morning," he said groggily. Nira looked up, her eyes bright. "Good morning, Jake. I have been experimenting with human technology." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what are you working on?" "I am trying to understand your communication devices. It is ... different from what we use on my planet." Jake chuckled softly. "Well, if you need help, just let me know. I'm a pro with these things." Nira's eyes lit up. "What? That would be helpful." "Yes, I would appreciate your guidance." As the morning passed, Jake started to feel more at ease with the situation. There were still moments of awkwardness, but they seemed to be fading away little by little. Nira was just trying to adapt, just like he was. Maybe in time they would both figure out how to live together without all the strange encounters. Jake woke up to the sound of Nira's humming again. It was a soft, almost melodic sound that seemed to float through the room like a gentle breeze. He stretched slowly and yawned, feeling the weight of a long shift ahead of him. He had grown used to the sound of Nira's voice and her humming, though sometimes it still felt strange, as if he were living in another world. Nira was sitting at her desk again, her long fingers moving gracefully over a strange device. She seemed completely absorbed in her work. Jake had come to realize that Nira didn't just learn by observing. She loved experimenting with new things. She had taken a particular interest in the technology aboard the space station, trying to understand the human-made devices. It was one of the things that brought them closer together. Even though they still had moments of awkwardness, Jake stood up from his bed and walked over to the small kitchenette. He was starting to feel more comfortable with the routine. Wake up, make some coffee, check in with Nira, and then go about his day. But as he prepared his morning coffee, something strange happened. Out of the corner of his eye, Jake saw Nira. Moving again, he didn't think much of it at first. She was always moving around the room, practicing her stretches or experimenting with things. But then, before he could fully react, he felt a shift in the air. Nira, in a smooth motion, had rolled from her desk and landed right on top of him. Jake froze. He had no idea how it happened so quickly, but there she was, her long limbs tangled with his, her face just inches from his. It was as if everything had happened in slow motion. Her eyes were wide in surprise, just as his were. "Oh no, not again," Nira exclaimed, pulling herself up quickly. She was embarrassed, her voice a mix of concern and regret. "Did it again, didn't I?" Jake, still stunned, slowly sat up, trying to process what had just happened. He had been so used to Nira's strange movements, but this was different. It wasn't just an accident, it was a full-on roll. It's like something from a strange dream. I didn't think you'd roll over onto me like that," Jake said, his voice a little shaky. He felt embarrassed too, though he wasn't sure if it was for him or for her. It's okay, really. Just ... unexpected." "I am so sorry, Jake," Nira said quickly, sitting back on her side of the room, her face filled with regret. "I don't understand why this keeps happening. My movements are different from yours. I don't always know how much space I need." Jake, trying to recover from the awkwardness of the situation, smiled lightly. "You don't have to apologize. Every time, it's just ... You have a lot of space to cover, and I don't always know where you're going." Nira nodded, her eyes soft. "I will try to be more careful. I do not wish to cause discomfort." Jake chuckled. "It's not that big of a deal. I'm just not used to." Rolling sessions in the morning?" Nira smiled a little, looking relieved. "I will control myself better, Jake. I promise." There was a brief silence before Nira stood up and walked over to a corner of the room. Jake couldn't help but laugh a little to himself. It was definitely a strange situation, but there was something about it that made him feel less tense. He didn't want to hurt Nira's feelings. She was trying, and that was all that mattered. You know, Jake said after a moment, still smiling, we need to set up some rules here. Like, if we're going to nap, we need a no rolling over rule or something. Nira turned toward him, looking interested. A rule? I would like that. I want us both to feel comfortable. Jake nodded. It's a deal then. No more surprise. Naps. Just some space, okay? I agree, Nira said. I will follow this rule. The two of them stood in silence for a moment, and Jake felt a sense of relief wash over him. The situation wasn't perfect, but it was getting better. Nira wasn't perfect either, but she was learning. And maybe, just maybe, he was learning how to live with her as well. Well, Jake said, breaking the silence, I guess we better get to work. I have a shift soon, and I'm sure you have more experiments to try. Nira laughed softly. Yes, I do. Thank you for being patient with me, Jake. I know it must be strange to live with someone like me. Jake shrugged. It's definitely different, but not bad. We're both just adjusting. After a moment of thought, Nira smiled warmly. I am glad to hear that. Jake returned the smile, feeling a little more at ease than before. Maybe things wouldn't always be smooth between them, but they were getting there. What the future held for him and Nira, but for now, it seemed like they could make it work. Maybe living with an alien wasn't so strange after all. As Jake left the room to head for his shift, he looked back at Nira, who was already working on another device. He felt a sense of calm settle in his chest. They might be different, but that didn't mean they couldn't find a way to live together, peacefully. The days passed quickly on the space station, and Jake found that life with Nira, his alien roommate, was starting to feel more and more normal. It wasn't always easy, but there was a quiet rhythm to their days. They had figured out their boundaries, their routines, and even began to laugh together at the small, awkward moments that came with living together. Jake had grown more comfortable with Nira's presence. She wasn't the strange, distant being he had first thought her to be. She was kind, intelligent, and, despite her different ways of doing things, had a genuine interest in learning about him and human culture. Every morning Nira would try to learn something new. Sometimes it was a human habit, like drinking coffee or a new game on Jake's old gaming system. Other times, it was something more complex, like the way humans interacted in groups or how they expressed emotions. Jake was happy to teach her, though there were moments when he felt like he wasn't doing it justice. He wasn't a teacher, and explaining the simple things of life sometimes felt more complicated than it should have been. One evening, after Jake had finished his work shift, he walked into their shared quarters and saw Nira sitting at her desk, deeply focused on something. Her long fingers moved quickly over a strange-looking device, and she muttered to herself in a language Jake didn't understand. Hey, Nira, what are you working on? Jake asked, trying to peek over her shoulder. Nira looked up, her eyes glowing. Softly in the dim light, I am experimenting with human communication, she explained. I want to understand more about how humans use technology to talk to one another. Jake nodded. Sounds interesting. What exactly are you doing? Nira held up a small device that looked like a communication pad. I have been trying to send a message, not sure if it will work. It is based on your technology, but I am not yet sure if I can make it understand me. Jake smiled and sat down next to her. I can help with that. Let me see. Nira handed him the device, and Jake examined it. This looks like an old model. You're trying to send a message, but I think you're missing the connection to the communication network. Let me fix that. Nira watched closely as Jake worked, his hands moving quickly over the device. There was a quiet hum of the stations. Machinery in the background, as Jake explained to Nira how human technology worked, step by step. As he worked, he couldn't help but think how far they had come since the first awkward days when Nira had rolled over onto him. After a few minutes, Jake handed the device back to Nira. All right, try it now. Nira hesitated for a moment before pressing a button on the device. She looked at Jake with wide eyes. It is working, she said softly. The message is sending. Jake leaned back in his chair, satisfied. There you go. You're getting the hang of it. Nira looked at the device for a moment longer before turning to face Jake. "Thank you," she said, her voice sincere. "I could not have done this without your help." Jake smiled. "No problem. I'm glad to help. It's kind of fun too." Teach you. Nira's eyes softened. "You are a good teacher, Jake. I have learned a lot from you." Jake felt his face flush slightly. He wasn't used to receiving compliments, especially not from someone as different from him as Nira. But there was something genuine in her words. It made him feel good. "Thanks," Jake said. "I've learned a lot from you too. It's been ... interesting living with an alien." Nira laughed softly. "I am glad it has been interesting for you. It has been a learning experience for me as well." As they sat there, Jake realized just how much their bond had grown over the past few weeks. There were still moments of awkwardness, like when Nira would accidentally roll over onto him again, or when she would ask questions about human behavior that Jake didn't quite have answers to, but there was also a growing sense of understanding between them. Nira wasn't just an alien anymore. She was a roommate, a friend even. And, strangely enough, Jake was beginning to look forward to their time together. "Hey, Nira," Jake said after a pause. "Do you ever miss home?" Nira's smile faded slightly as she thought for a moment. "Yes, I do," she said softly. "I miss my people, my planet. But I am here to learn, and every day I learn something new. I enjoy being here with you, Jake." Jake nodded. "Get that? I think I've learned more in the past few weeks than I ever did back on Earth. About everything. I mean, I never thought I'd be living with an alien." Nira smiled, her eyes glowing a little brighter. "I am glad we can learn from each other." There was another brief moment of silence, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful, the kind of silence that came from mutual respect and understanding. "Do you want to do something today?" Jake asked, breaking the silence. "Maybe we can watch a movie or play a game or something?" Nira's eyes lit up. "I would like that," she said eagerly. "What is a movie?" Jake chuckled. "All right, we'll start with that then." As Jake set up the movie, he realized that living with Nira might not be as strange as he had first thought. They had their differences, yes, but they also had something else, a friendship. Slowly growing stronger, built on understanding and patience. He wasn't sure where this would lead, but for the first time since Nira had moved in, Jake felt a sense of contentment. Maybe living with an alien wasn't so bad after all. It had been a few more weeks since. Jake and Nira had settled into their routine, and Jake was beginning to realize that the awkwardness that had once defined their living situation was almost completely gone. They still had moments where they had to adjust to each other's different habits, but those moments were becoming fewer and farther between. One thing that had changed was how comfortable they had become with each other. They would share meals, talk about their days, and even laugh at the little things that made their situations so unique. Nira had learned to control her movements, and Jake had learned to give her space, even if it meant she sometimes rolled onto him again by accident. But it was becoming more of a joke than a problem. That afternoon, after Jake's shift, he returned to their shared quarters, tired but feeling good. He expected the usual quiet atmosphere, but today there was something different. Nira was sitting on the floor in front of a strange-looking device, a big smile on her face. She looked up as Jake entered, her eyes lighting up. "Jake, you must come here," she said, excited. "I have created something." Jake raised an eyebrow and walked over. "Created something? What is it?" Nira stood up, her tall figure blocking the device, as if she was hiding it. "You will see. I have been experimenting with human entertainment." Jake grinned, feeling a bit of curiosity. "What kind of entertainment are we talking about here?" Nira stepped aside and revealed a small, makeshift movie projector. It looked rough, made with a mixture of Nira's alien technology and some human parts she had borrowed from Jake's equipment. "I have made this," she said proudly. "I will show you a human movie." Jake's eyes widened. "You made a projector? From scratch? That's pretty impressive." Nira smiled. "I have been studying human devices. I thought this would be fun." Jake sat down on the floor, intrigued. "All right, I'm all for it. Let's see what you've got." Nira turned on the device, and a flickering image appeared on the wall. It was a human movie, a classic comedy that Jake had seen many times, but it felt different somehow. Watching it through Nira's eyes made it feel fresh again. He couldn't help but laugh at the jokes, even though he knew what was coming next. But it was more than just the movie. It was the fact that Nira had worked so hard to bring a piece of human culture into their shared space. It was something that brought them even closer together. As the movie played, Nira watched Jake's reactions closely. Every time he laughed, she seemed to study him, trying to understand why certain things were funny. Jake didn't mind. It was kind of amusing to think that Nira, his alien roommate, was trying to learn humor. "This is interesting," Nira said quietly after a while. "The way humans laugh at simple things. Why do you find this funny?" Jake paused the movie and turned to her. "Well, I think humor comes from the unexpected. It's a way for people to bond, to laugh at life's little mistakes or oddities." Nira nodded thoughtfully. "So you laugh to feel closer to others?" "Exactly," Jake said, smiling. "It's something that connects us." Nira looked at him for a long moment, as if thinking deeply. "I will try to understand more. Laughter is ... powerful." Jake laughed softly. "You're getting it. You're doing great." They resumed the movie, and for the first time, Jake didn't feel like he was just humoring Nira. He could see that she was genuinely trying, not just to understand human culture, but to connect with him. And that made him feel a little less lonely. He wasn't just living with an alien anymore. He was living with someone who cared. After the movie ended, Nira turned to Jake. "Thank you for watching with me. I've learned much today." Jake stretched, feeling a pleasant warmth in his chest. "No problem. It was fun." "I want to learn more about human laughter," Nira said seriously. "I want to know how to make others laugh." Jake chuckled, feeling amused. "Well, if you really want to make someone laugh, I think it's all about timing and surprise." Nira looked thoughtful. "I see. I will practice." "I'm sure you'll get it," Jake said with a grin. "Maybe we could watch some more movies together sometime. We could try something else, like playing games or cooking." Nira's eyes sparkled. "I would like that very much." "I enjoy spending time with you, Jake." Jake nodded, feeling a sense of connection he hadn't expected. It wasn't just the movie that had made their time together special. It was the way Nira was learning and growing, just like him. They were both figuring things out, slowly but surely. Later that evening, Jake and Nira sat together in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The quiet wasn't awkward anymore. It was just two people well, one person and one alien existing in the same space, comfortable in each other's presence. Jake looked over at Nira and smiled. "I never thought living with someone something like you would turn out this well." Nira looked up at him, a small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. "I am glad, Jake. I enjoy our time together." Jake nodded. "Me too. It's not perfect, but it's good. I thought it's enough for now." And for the first time since Nira had arrived, Jake felt like maybe this arrangement could work after all. They were different, yes, but they were learning from each other. And that, Jake realized, was the most important thing. Jake woke up too. The quiet hum of the station's systems, his body stretching comfortably as he opened his eyes. The sunlight filtered through the small window of their shared quarters, casting soft light across the room. He glanced over at Nira, who was still asleep, curled up in her usual way on her side of the room. The way she slept, so peaceful and relaxed, made Jake smile. It was strange to think how far they'd come since the awkward moments at the beginning. Over the past few weeks, he had learned a lot about Nira, but she had also learned about him. It wasn't just about adjusting to living together anymore. They had begun to understand each other in a way that felt more natural. Jake had learned to give Nira space when she needed it, and she had learned to be mindful of his comfort. There was still the occasional awkward moment, like when she would roll over in her sleep or ask a question that made Jake pause for a moment. But these were no longer uncomfortable. They had become part of their routine, a part of the unique bond they were building. Jake stood up, stretching his arms overhead before quietly moving to the kitchen. He began making a cup of coffee, the warmth of the drink filling him with a sense of calm. As he worked, he thought about how much things had changed. When Nira had first moved in, He had been nervous and unsure. He had never thought that living with an alien could become so normal. But here he was, waking up in the same room as Nira, and it felt ... Okay. The door to the kitchen slid open, and Nira walked in, her tall frame standing in the doorway. Her hair, which was a smooth silver color, fell loosely around her shoulders. She looked at Jake with a small smile, her bright eyes full of curiosity. "Good morning, Jake," Nira said softly. Jake turned around, smiling back. "Good morning. How's your day starting?" "I've been thinking," Nira replied, taking a seat at the small table, "about all that I've learned since arriving here. About humans. About you." Jake raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Have you been thinking?" Nira's smile widened as she looked at him. "I think we have both learned something important. We're not so different, despite everything. I have come to understand that humans, like me, need time to learn, time to grow, time to make mistakes and find our way." Jake nodded slowly, understanding what she meant. "Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. I've learned a lot about you and about myself. Living with you, I didn't expect that." Nira looked down for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "At first, I thought I would never understand humans. I did not know how to interact with you. But now I see that you are more like me than I thought. We both seek connection, we both make mistakes, and we both try our best." Jake felt a warmth in his chest at Nira's words. She was right. They had both struggled to understand each other at first, but now they were learning and growing together. He had never imagined that living with an alien would lead to something like this, a friendship even. "I guess I didn't expect you to get it," Jake said with a small laugh. "I thought you'd always be ... different. But now it feels like we've got this whole thing figured out." Nira's eyes softened. As she met his gaze, "We are not so different after all. Both just needed time." Jake smiled, feeling the connection between them grow even stronger. "Yeah, time and patience. A little humor doesn't hurt." Nira smiled back, and for a moment there was a peaceful silence between them. Jake realized that it wasn't just the big moments that mattered. It was the small, everyday moments, the laughter, the quiet talks, and the shared experiences that were bringing them closer. After a few minutes, Nira spoke again. "Jake, I want to thank you for being patient with me, for teaching me, for letting me live with you." Jake shook his head. "I should be thanking you. I've learned so much from you. Things I never would have expected." "Human," Nira said, her voice filled with sincerity. "I am happy to have you as a roommate. Hope we can continue to learn together." Jake couldn't help but smile. "Me too." Later that day, Jake and Nira found themselves sitting together, enjoying the quiet of the space station. They weren't doing anything special, just being in each other's company, but it felt like the most natural thing in the world. For the first time, Jake realized that the differences between them didn't matter as much as the things they shared. Nair leaned back in her chair, looking out the window at the stars. "Jake, do you ever wonder what's out there, beyond the stars?" Jake followed her gaze, his eyes drifting to the vast, endless space outside. "Yeah, all the time. I think about what other life is out there, what other worlds there are. But I also think about how lucky I am to be right here, right now, with you." Nira turned her head to look at him, her eyes shining. "I feel the same. We are both lucky. I think this is just the beginning of something ... something good." Jake smiled at her, feeling a deep sense of contentment. He had never expected his life to take this turn, but now, with Nira by his side, he couldn't imagine it any other way. The days ahead might bring more challenges, more awkward moments, but Jake was no longer afraid of what the future might hold. Whatever came their way, he knew one thing for sure: they would face it together, and that was enough.